everybody. I am Suba. I am so excited to be recording and sending this intro video for Tools for Better Tomorrow. I'm excited for the work Sarah Healy and the team are doing, and I'm sorry I couldn't be part of the actual panel. My role right now is I am a mom to twin boys, and as far as my career is concerned, I'm a senior vice president at Mozilla running strategy and ops for the company. In my previous role for 11 years at Meta, I did a lot of work around our women's business groups or business resource groups, and also some work with the AAPI groups and others. And even prior to that, throughout my lifetime of being able to do this as an adult, I feel like I've been involved in some way or the other with diversity causes. I'll put it in 3 buckets. It matters at work. And at work, empathy is required for high performance. We all agree on that. But that means to be empathetic, you need to be highly aware. And that is being highly aware of everybody, their lived experiences, their differences, what everyone brings to the table. And that is incredibly nuanced. Without that awareness, you'll never be fully empathetic. Without that empathy, you'll never drive a high performance team or culture. And you'll never represent for all the customers that you as a company might want to represent for. That's why it matters at work. In my personal life, it matters to me because when I think about my legacy, all the little contributions that I can have in this space do add up to that, what I consider a legacy. So in the smallest possible ways, everybody can make a difference. That includes you, that includes me. And then I'm raising twin boys, as I said. I want them to be highly aware of their different experiences and of those around them. I want them to be active allies to others and seek allyship from others as they grow up. I think that's super important from a society perspective. I do think from a corporate or company level, if you get it right, you have happier employees, and we all know what that means in the long term. In the long term, it means achieving the company's plans, be it revenue, be it whatever else that matters to the company. Without happier employees, you're just not going to achieve it in the long run. You're going to be focused on the short game, which is not helpful. The consequences of getting it wrong is perpetuating stereotypes. It's about creating a society of bubble-mindedness, of closed-mindedness, which means all of the things I mentioned earlier on why DEI matters to me, that could fail at a societal and different company or even national or global level. There are huge consequences of getting it wrong. Frankly, the world is diverse, but equity and inclusion have barely started off on their journey towards making this world a much more diverse, equitable, and inclusive space. With that, I would like future generations to not have to think about DEI as a program. Right now, I would advocate for all of us to think of it as a lens through which we live our lives. And for future generations, that just needs to be ingrained and table stakes. That is a tall order, and I hope one day we achieve that. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we discuss belonging, why diversity, equity, and inclusion are vital for continued success. We just heard from Suba, the Senior VP of Strategy and Operations at Mozilla, and her thoughts on the topic. And now joining us is this fantastic group of panelists as we discuss DEI&B and the pitfalls as well as the highlights of getting it wrong and right. My name is Nellie. I'm going to be leading you guys through the session today, and currently I spearhead customer support and compliance efforts at Uber Eats. My background is in operations and program management, and I've also been active as a marketing and communications leader, all while working in companies of all shapes and sizes, be they startups, SMBs, or massive corporations. I've been a DEI resource group leader at both Uber and Meta, and have on-the-ground professional experience in over 30 countries. In my free time, I volunteer as an advisory board member for Marketplace Risk and as a TSBA member, as well as being an avid tarot card reader. So if you guys have any questions about the future, I'm your gal. Alicia is now up next as the global HR leader at Yelp. She is ex-TikTok, Microsoft, and LinkedIn. In that while, she has built a foundation in talent acquisition and dedicated the last 15 years to HR roles in the tech industry. Her expertise lies in guiding HR teams to implement initiatives that bolster business success. Her greatest passion lies in fostering environments that allow for personal growth and encourage authenticity in the workplace. And her authentic self is apparently happiest when singing and at musicals. So eager to hear more about that. Would love to also know what your favorite musical is. But we also have a very sporty, very active panelist in Stephanie Peterson, who is an executive in the tech industry with over 25 years of experience. She's been at the forefront of leading high-performing teams via Microsoft and Meta, and has a lot of expertise spanning operations, software development, supply chain risk management, and AI and machine learning data program management. She's a dedicated leader in the DEI space, and her passion stems from her own background in the TRIO Upward Bound program. She was recognized for both business and community contributions and has received prestigious honors as a TRIO National Achiever, Nevada Woman of Achievement, and Inclusion in Reno's Tahoe's 20 Under 40. Stephanie is also a patent author and has actively served on advisory boards in both profit and non-for-profit sectors. She derives the most satisfaction from cultivating managers into leaders, tackling the most challenging opportunities to drive strategic outcomes, and enhancing the credibility of organizations. And somehow, in the midst of all that, she still finds time to be an avid snowboarder, and actually is going to be going snowboarding today, as I've heard and have been astutely envious of. Sarah is also one of our more active, when it comes to sports and all that fun, active panelists. She is the founder and CEO of Tools for Better and has had a 20-year career at Meta, Accenture, Paddy Power, and many more, where she scoped out leadership, strategy, and operations. Her primary expertise is in program and change management, and she's founded and led employee resource groups and has a prominent DEI&B leader background throughout her career. Tools for Better is Sarah's pride and joy, apart from her children. So maybe this is like the third baby, let's say. And she's also become an avid Gaelic football player, which, that sounds like it's a relatively new twist there, Sarah. I'm very eager to hear about that as well. But today, we're actually not talking about sports. We're not talking about singing, musicals, and tarot card reading. That is a session for a different day. Today, as we had mentioned at the top, we're talking about belonging. Now, we've heard the term belonging quite a lot of times when we're speaking about DEI. So we want to first off ask you, Sarah, what does belonging mean to you?
Thanks, Nellie. Thanks for that fantastic introduction. I get this question a lot. What does it actually mean to belong? In the Venn diagram of diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging is in the center. It's what you get when you get the right balance and investment in the other three. And so just as a reminder, diversity is about driving a conscious effort to have multiple and varied identities in your organization, ideally making sure that your workforce reflects your customers and society. Equity is about continuously evolving to ensure an equitable work environment. And this means retaining a flexible approach that enables everybody, right? So not just one type of person. As an example, some people might enjoy working in the office. In others, that might not be an option, and others just might prefer working remotely. Having these type of options means that everybody can thrive. And inclusion. Inclusion is about creating a culture where everybody, all employees, can be authentic, can participate, and progress. So belonging is the combination of all of these things, where values, views, and beliefs are integrated, and every individual possesses psychological safety. So I don't know who said it originally, but the one thing that I use to describe, and it's always stuck with me, is that belonging is the opposite of fitting in. Oh, and just to note that we will be using the terms DEI and DEI&B and EDI all interchangeably throughout. It's just a habit. So just to flag that as well. Back to you, Nellie.
Well, thank you so much. I think that is a truly beautiful statement about belonging being the opposite of fitting in. I think that is a healthy, but sometimes obviously difficult practice to actually implement in the day-to-day. So, Alicia, that actually brings us to our second question. You've worked in amazing companies over the years, and as a strong leader who happens to be a woman, was there ever a point of time or a situation improving belonging would have improved the outcome of said situation?
Thanks, Nellie. I love this question. I think it's a great one. When I think about this question, I think about it in two ways. So the first thing is kind of as a HR professional, I'm working in HR for such a long time. I think from a more broader sense, I've worked with many kind of acquisitions in some of the tech companies that I've worked in, where we had to learn as we went. We didn't focus enough time on how we create space for belonging for our new colleagues that would have joined the company that I worked in. And we had to learn very difficult lessons, and we had so many teething problems from when we brought in like new employees with different backgrounds, different experiences, that we actually needed to focus on how we made them feel that they belong in the new company. And that was something that kind of really fed kind of my interest and my want in this topic as well. I think I want to learn more in this topic. So I think it's really important to kind of focus on the people as we're doing it and how to make them belong. From a personal note, I think when I think about, the kind of broader scale from a company perspective, how the individual might feel, I think that is something that's really important to focus on too. And I think a situation that comes to my mind is a very personal one, one that had a real impact on me, and is something that I think reflects kind of what I would believe to be many people's experiences as they think about how it is to be to feel that they don't belong in a working environment. So during my career, I've worked in 2 different teams where I was the only person who had children. So my managers didn't have any children. I've got 3 children. And no one on the team had children. So I always felt very much that I almost needed to pretend that I didn't have children, or that they didn't exist, or I felt excluded because I couldn't join the rest of the team when they were going for drinks after work. I wasn't able to work late like everybody else could, and I always felt that it was a space where I felt that I just couldn't be myself in that environment, and I felt that I couldn't thrive in that environment, which I think was something that really stuck with me. In one of the companies I worked in, there was an expectation for me to be available all the time, morning, noon, night, and that the work came first. And at one point I was asked by the leader, or by my manager, to travel to the US. It was suggested actually at that time that if I didn't go, it would impact my career if I didn't do that. And I was been asked to go for 4 weeks. And at the time, having children, it was like they would ask how my kids were, but they wouldn't. It never kind of impacted their day to day. There was never an expectation that I would be putting my kids first. It was always an expectation that my job came first, and the pressure that put on me to ask me to travel for 4 weeks was just immense. I was already working really hard, and being a working mother, I found quite tough as it was. So I was already under a lot of pressure, but that job tested my boundaries so much that I actually got very sick. I was very mentally and physically exhausted, and I felt that there wasn't really anyone I could have that conversation with. I felt that the ask to go to the US, I felt that I couldn't say I actually can't go or don't want to be away from my family for that long, because there was nobody who would understand that from my perspective. And given that no one else on the team nor my manager was a parent or anyone or a carer, it looked like I was the one who stood out from the rest of the team as the person who just didn't want to go, and that I wasn't putting the company first. And I think the way that the company focused their energy on driving business results over the individual really impacted me as a person. And the same organization, I had a similar story where there was just an expectation for me to join calls when I was supposed to be with my kids, and I had already said I need to be with my kids, and they were pushing me to join calls all the time. And I just found that I was kind of on an island by myself. So I'd say for me, it boils down to the fact that I never really felt that I could be my true self at that company, and that I had to act like someone else, and that it wasn't a truly safe space for me to say, hey, I actually can't do that because I need to do XYZ with my children, or I I need some time for myself. And interestingly, I was actually a top performer at that company. I've exceeded expectations in all of my reviews. But I actually had to make the decision to leave the company, because I think one of the things I've learned and I've tried to bring with me through my career since then is that the companies have to actively make an effort to listen to what the employees are saying. And I didn't feel like anyone was listening to me on what I actually needed or wanted. So they just assumed I was focused more on my career than my family, without actually discussing with me what was important to me. And I think a company that truly listens, or people who truly listen and create that safe space for people to be able to say, actually, this won't work for me, would have, and if that was the space that they had created, would have actually made, I don't feel I would have been in a position to feel like I had to leave the company.
Well, we're obviously sorry to hear that you had to go through such a pressure cooker-like situation, I would say, and really listening also about the lack of boundaries in the workplace. That is definitely a difficult situation to be in. Stephanie, what about yourself? Have you seen situations, either personally or in the larger, colleague cohort, let's say, where you've also seen situations that could have been improved with DEI&B practices?
Yeah, I'm going to share a little bit of experience about being Latina in the tech industry, but I just want to build really quickly Alicia's comments, because one of the very first times I remember this pull of bias or representation and having to stick up for it. And I probably should have noticed other times earlier, and maybe I did, but this one resonates differently. But I was new into leadership and new into managing people. And we were doing one of the people workshops where we figure out, who's up for promo and who should be on succession slates or whatever. And we were having a conversation about a woman with small children. And somebody made the comment, and I was new to this peer group and new to management. And somebody made the comment, well, not sure if we should put her on the succession slate because she has small kids and she may not want X, Y, and Z pressure or ABC travel. And I just very strongly felt in that, in that moment, it was we don't get to make that decision. If she qualifies for the job, we put her on the succession slate, and then have a safe conversation about what and how, she's managing the things that are important to her. But it was so blatant. And I remember this, and it was so blatant to me, but not to a handful of other people. And so, I just think that's a good example of just why it matters so much. And also sorry that you had to experience that. So
that is so great that you did that. And I think if we just had lots more of you or what you did stepping in that space, I think, then I think people will just get the message. It's actually listen, understand, ask people what they want. Don't assume because of anything that they don't want something, and talk about them. What are their values? What way does that work for them? And you're totally right. I love to hear that, though. I think that's a really great approach that you took.
Yeah. And then a different pivot on this as well is that I was reflecting on this question, and I realized that as a Latina in tech and as a Latina leader in tech, there's just never been a time in my entire career that I wasn't part of a minority or underrepresented population in my career. I've never been the majority in a room, never walked into a room and I'm the majority and here's my people. And, and so it's just been a really interesting thing to reflect on. I did a little bit of research on that because when I think of things like that, I'm very data driven. And I found that at Meta in 2022, the Hispanic and Latinx representation was 5.4% in leadership. And this is Latinx, so this isn't Latinas, which you could take the ratio of, women in leadership and apply it there, I'm sure. Microsoft in 2021 was 3.7%. And I also found that 1% of board seats for Fortune 500 companies in either 2021 or 2022 were made up by Latinas. And so just kind of back to that question, if there was ever a time or a situation where stronger DEI practices would have improved an outcome, I would just say my whole career. And especially when we think about these my career's been in FANG companies. So these huge $1 trillion companies. And I also went and wrote down trillion because I'm how many zeros is that? Is that 9? Is that 12? It's 12 zeros behind the 1 or the whatever. And so these companies have this global and societal reach and fiscal reach as well. But then less than double digit racial representation of Latinx or Hispanic people. And also, I will say, also Black and African American, Native American. So I'm talking on behalf of my lived experience, but they might be other people's too. And it just doesn't represent the user base as wholly as it needs to be for the products we're building, the impacts these products we have, and what we expect society to be like for everyone.
You've already stated a couple of these situations when things don't work out well, and the fact that, these massive corporations don't have more diverse talent at the top, or like even throughout the company, let's be honest. So let's look at it from the positive side. When we do see examples of company culture getting it right, what does that look like? Stephanie, do you have any positive experiences with that?
Yeah, I think I kind of always answer this in two ways, because I think there's a people aspect and there's a business aspect. Like, there is a business aspect to making money and running a business. And I think from the people aspects, when people feel safe and when they feel, like Sarah talked very eloquently about the definition of belonging, when they feel like they belong, they will do their best work, period. We've all seen it, studied, it's so clear. And so I think that there is just this human element of how we think about performance and belonging that are so interconnected. I also think there's this innate responsibility we have to be fair and equitable to people. And I think a lot of people feel like that. Like, I think the people at the core of being human, I think that a lot of people feel that that's important. But there's also a business aspect to it. And what really happens when we get it right in the business world is that we build products that matter to everyone. We're more proactively inclusive about removing bias from solutions and products like AI. We create augmented realities that truly represent everyone and bring joy to the people who feel like they're represented in these realities. People have more fun in games and people feel more relatable to the products they're using. And so I think just in general, when we do D&I correctly, which is much, much more beyond like the numbers and the boxes that we're checking of trying to, show that we're doing it correctly. We just make better products, and that's important. And from a business aspect, it drives more revenue. And then it also is morally appropriate for society and the world too. So you get both. It's a twofer.
It's nice when things work out like that, right? I think actually when you're talking about representation and especially games, one of the big names obviously this year was Baldur's Gate. And that is something that has been like shining through its representation and through the different ways that you can customize and identify with your own character, and they are making bank. So it is very, very clear that they're, like you said, if that twofer, essentially it works very well and goes hand in hand. But there's obviously always a flip side. So Alicia, especially with the HR expertise that you have, I'm sure that you've seen the pitfalls of when D&I practices aren't adhered to, when we fail, so to speak, in that aspect.
Yeah. I've seen it a lot. I mean, there are so many consequences that can be met. And I think the fundamental ones are it's creating a space of where people don't feel that they belong, or that they have, or having to be someone that you're not, does create a space for burnout, has physical, emotional, and mental impacts, which are very risky, which obviously we don't want to do from a humane perspective. Nobody wants to create that space for someone to go through that, and they are very real impacts that happen to people, and there's so much more of it happening now in the world than ever before, or at least we're recording much more of it. But it's risky for the business from a legal side, of course, there's the impact. There's a lot of legislation around this now, and it's evolving all the time as the the ways of working move and change. Like things like stress in the workplace and so on. All of those things are super important and need to be looked at from the legal side. But it's also on Steph's point as well, it's very risky from the business side. You just simply cannot be getting the best out of your employees if you aren't creating an environment where they feel heard, understood, where it's a safe space where they feel they can give their feedback. And if you don't feel like you can give their feedback, you're going to be limiting innovation and all kinds of change that you need to be looking at. And I think those things are hugely important from a consequence perspective. And if you think about it from even the story I shared earlier, you lose talent, you lose your best talent, because the really good people other companies want. And if other companies are offering all these things that people need to feel that they belong, they're going to start looking that way. And the story happened for me. That's how it's been. So I think companies really, really need to zoom in and focus on it from all of these angles, and really, learn how to approach it in the best way.
Well, Sarah, since you founded Tools for Better, is there anything else? Because Alicia's already mentioned quite a few really great points. We're talking about compliance, we're talking about lack of innovation, obviously losing top tier talent. Is there anything where you've also seen either specifically the focus from companies that are trying to avoid these pitfalls, or potentially something else that you'd like to add when we're talking about the consequences of getting it wrong?
The risk is the risk aspect, right? Getting it wrong leaves you your company open to risk. It's as simple as that, right? In a nutshell, all ages, all industries, everyone needs to care about DEI&B because this concept is fundamentally founded in law, right? So like in Ireland, there is that ever-evolving employment legislation that Alicia touched on that prohibits discrimination, and you're seeing new policies and regulation coming into place all the time. For example, earlier this week, I think it was, I attended training hosted by Women's Aid in Ireland on how to support those who are victims of domestic violence. Like, this is an incredibly important topic for society, right? But it's also an important topic for business because there's legislation that has been implemented recently that provides 5 days paid leave only if a person discloses abuse, right? So how do organizations handle this? That's the question. How do you implement a process and a policy around this? Organizations need to be ready for policies such as these, and those that stay ahead of legislation will at the very least mitigate these risks, and at most will gain everything that Stephanie mentioned earlier, and you'll attract and keep your best talents, as Alicia mentioned earlier. And you might even attract and keep Alicia.
Yeah, I mean, all of us, I would dare to think would be very attracted to company cultures that are obviously getting it right, so to speak. And I think that it also matters more and more for future generations, which actually brings us to the next topic of, well, how do you think DE&I are going to impact the future generations? Maybe you see that already in your children, maybe you see that with younger colleagues, or just also what's being discussed in the headline. But Stephanie, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you think it's impacting the future generation.
Yeah. I have a 16 and a 15-year-old. So they're on the verge of, being in the real world, whatever age you think that is. I feel like every few years I re-enter the real world myself. But I think on this question about impacting further generations, it's probably top of mind for everyone, but it really drew me to thinking about AI. I really think we're at the forefront of just a vastly impacting technology, maybe more than anyone we've ever seen. I don't think there's anything that AI won't change or impact. Education, arts, and creativity, the economy, medicine. I mean, it has this vast reach, and I don't know that we've ever seen a technology like that. I was actually trying to think of what have we seen that has the potential to impact society in such breadth. And for me, I'm maybe religion was the last time that something had this much reach, really. And so there's nothing that AI won't change. I think if we get it right, DEI right, by having the right representation in our workforce and having the right, again, a step further, belonging and inclusion in the workforce. And then also, especially where the critical decisions are being made about the future of the world, because that's happening today in boardrooms and in C-suites. People are making critical decisions about the world, and they're doing it with the percentage of representation I just mentioned. And I think that's really, really critical to be thinking about. But when we get it right for future generations, I really, really think we make, I mentioned we make better products. That sense of belonging and how people think and interact with each other and feel connected. That's a big piece of what's in my mind a lot with raising kids in a vast more kind of technology savvy world than I grew up in, is that, that their mental health is better and that they feel connected to others. And that I think the expansiveness that the future can have on that, when we get DEI right, is amazing. And I think the getting it wrong risk is really, really high. And the consequences that we talked about are really high too, in terms of like the gap in wealth, how people are educated, and how they're pulled into education, how they feel connected, and mental health. I think the getting it wrong scares me quite a bit.
As somebody who uses ChatGPT and other AI-related tools daily, would definitely agree that it can be such a boon. It can be so beneficial. It's kind of like having a personal assistant or just this massively capable helper at your fingertips. But totally understand that AI was produced and created with a very specific cohort at the beginning, and obviously we need to ensure that that it's much more equitable. And thankfully, there are some conversations, Steph, to your points. But yeah, there's a long way to go. Totally agree, though, that if we get it right, the impact would be so positive. I wanted to ask Alicia as well. Like, you've mentioned that your mother as well. Do you have similar thoughts, or how do you feel about DEI, DEI&B, DEI, like one of the many names, right, impacting future generations?
Well, yeah, I do think being or looking at the generations, like even that we've had now, the change between Gen X, such as myself, and millennials, has been so vast, I think, and our learnings kind of in terms of what the expectation is from a generational perspective. I think that's going to be really important because you've seen the change. You can see how Gen Zs now have taken to the next level, where they want more in terms of acceptance, in terms of that sense of belonging, and they actually just won't take anything else other than that. And so we really do need to really move at the time. I have, as you said, I have a 13-year-old, so my son is 13, and I have 2 8-year-olds. So he's a Gen Alpha, and even when I think about how he thinks about things and how he looks at the world, there is actually no room for anything other than you just, you come as you are, and that's just it. And I think that's going to be the expectation, and we really, really need to move to make sure that we create that space for them when they start to enter in the workforce, and just for the future generations as well. I think it's just going to be expected as the norm.
I look forward to that. Definitely the come as you are with no boxes, essentially, sounds like a very positive way to look into the future. But speaking of maybe a little bit more of a tangible future, because we are obviously here to talk about tools for better and kicking things off, and the fact that Sarah, now you've founded the business, you started there. So tell us a little bit about why you wanted to start Tools for Better, and also what are your next tangible future steps? What's going to be happening next?
Oh, well, thank you so much for asking, Nellie. To quote Lucy Gurnan, an amazing personal coach, there's something about turning 40 that gives you perspective, right? Since I was a kid, I always wanted to own my own business. I was the kid out on the road in the estate selling, my old toys, my sister's old toys, and selling homemade buns. And like that drive to kind of have a business, like, stayed with me when I was older. I just did not know what I wanted that business to be. And then in 2018, the eighth referendum was going on in Ireland. And getting involved in that movement to repeal and seeing all these phenomenal women and their allies stand up and drive grassroots change for the betterment of women in Ireland ignited something in me that made me want to focus on inclusion and on community. And so when I finished in Meta as part of their layoffs last year, I thought now is the time to do something about this. And that's why we're here today. Tools for Better is now officially launched. Tools for Better is now officially launched.
Yay! Yeah, we all had to, I think, unmute ourselves to cheer. We're very happy.
Yes.
Woohoo!
So needed.
And to remind you, we offer diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging supports such as strategy, implementation, training, change management, and connectivity opportunities around a plethora of subjects from neurodiversity to inclusive language and allyship. And in the near future, you're going to see our mentorship tool go live, and there's plenty more Tools for Better to come. So thank you. And I'm so glad you're here to experience this with us.
Well, we're very excited for everything that Tools for Better has to offer. And to everybody watching, please check out the toolsforbetter.com site, as well as follow us at Tools for Better on the LinkedIn pages. And you'll be seeing new updates as they come up, as Sarah launches them with lots of vigor and gusto. But yes, that is it from us for today. Thank you so much. Keep your eyes peeled for the next panel, and we'll hopefully be seeing you there.